Welcome to the Social Newsroom edition that is being hosted from the Kenyatta International Convention Center and in collaboration with Hali Hewa. And the pretty host, that is Abigail Kima, is to my left. It is a pleasure to be co-hosting with you today.
Pleasure to be co-hosting.
It is a big deal that's brought us here, right?
Yes, it is.
You've been here for the full day. What's been happening? Just tell us about that.
Of course, so many delegates are getting in, trying to get their badges and trying to make sure their voices are heard in those rooms.
Yeah.
So I'd say throughout the day, I've been having a chat with a number of people who are at the summit for different reasons, from exhibitors to delegates to speakers, and just getting their perspective on what they want to see the Africa Climate Summit delivering, especially with the Nairobi Declaration. So it's been quite a beautiful experience today.
I don't know if the president was just bragging because he's the host, but he did say that this is a first of the kind Africa Climate Summit. So it is a big deal that it is convening here in Nairobi and that we're having this conversation on African soil, making decisions. On Wednesday, we'll be having a declaration on African soil, not far away or removed from here. Where the reality, where it pinches us, that's where we're making the decision. So Dr. Fadhel Kaboub, tell us a bit about yourself and how you plug into the conversation here today. And karibu to Nairobi, I'm told you've been posted recently.
Karibu sana.
Asante.
So my name is Fadhel Kaboub.
Yes.
I'm a Tunisian economist. I'm an associate professor of economics at Denison University in Ohio in the US and president of the Global Institute for Sustainable Prosperity.
All right. So your conversation, you're keen on what aspect of the climate conversation? Tell us about
Well, what's so unique about this event is that it's the first time that we have an African climate summit. And we're trying to deal with the climate crisis, but simultaneously with the financial aspect of the climate crisis. And that brings us to one important conversation, which is this global financial architecture that was designed not by us, designed not for us in 1944 when we were colonized. It can't be the same financial architecture that will save us today. So this is our message to the world, to the global community, that we need to redesign a global trade and finance architecture that works, that rebalances the global system. So we can create the fiscal space across the world to tackle the climate crisis.
Right.
So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is the climate crisis is not simply a climate action mandate, but it's also a development mandate, because it just turns out to be that every policy that we will take on the climate front is also a development opportunity. And for Africa in particular, when we think of one of the biggest aspects of economic problems that we have is the external debt, it's actually a symptom of much deeper development issues, and those are development and climate opportunities. And if I may list them briefly, the three major sources of our external debt problem are food deficits. We import 85% of our food when we used to be the breadbasket of the world. Number two, we have energy deficits, and that includes even a country like Nigeria that today imports 100% of its gasoline. And number three, we have a manufacturing deficit in the sense that we tend to import high value added manufacturing, high tech products, and we export low value added manufacturing or simply raw materials. So you take these three together and you have a structural trade deficit that weakens our currencies relative to the dollar. When you have a weak currency, everything you want to import the next morning, whether it's food or medicine for your people, it's going to be more expensive. So we have an inflation problem because of that. And then what we do as a band-aid solution, we have our government step in and subsidize food, subsidize fuel to unsustainable levels after decades. And then we ask our central banks to borrow dollars to artificially stabilize the exchange rate and keep feeding into that external debt cycle. So then we go full circle to what do we do with the financial architecture to facilitate climate action? And we're told the only parameters we're allowed to manipulate is maybe lower interest rate, maybe more favorable terms, which is helpful. But that doesn't answer the fundamental root causes, which is
the short end of the stick.
Exactly. But the solutions are in front of us. And we hope that our leaders this week will tackle those simultaneously as we tackle climate action. So the solution is to invest in food sovereignty and agroecology. That's a climate solution. That's also a development solution. The solution is to invest in renewable energy sovereignty. That's a climate solution, but also a development solution to allow us to leapfrog into a new technological era and to deliver electricity to the 600 million people who currently don't have any electricity on this continent, to deliver clean cooking technology to the 970 million people who are inhaling toxic fumes on a daily basis, mostly women and children. And the third solution is to tackle the industrialization deficits that we have by using the strategic minerals that we have on this continent for high-tech revolution, for renewable energy revolution, to manufacture not for exports, but to manufacture and deploy technology on the continent. So it's a win-win for us when it comes to development and when it comes to climate action. And we can't separate the two, and we can't compromise on any of this. So that's what I hope to see by the end of this summit.
Right.
Great. I mean, you've talked about renewable energy and the fact that Africa has great potential to leapfrog from, dirty fossil fuels to a green pathway. And of course, one of the biggest components in this particular summit is also the green minerals. And I just wanted to understand, what does just energy transition actually look like for Africa, considering our differences, our nuances that exist? Because of course what Kenya wants is not what Tanzania wants. So what does it actually look like when we say just energy transition for Africa?
Absolutely. So a just transition is clearly a transition from an old system that was unjust, that left millions of people behind economically and ecologically, and a transition to a system that's transformed, that doesn't reproduce the same structural traps. So on the strategic minerals or green minerals front, which is our greatest opportunity today in Africa, it's an industrialization opportunity. But here's why it has to be a Pan-African industrialization, not a country-by-country industrialization. Because when you talk about manufacturing anything, there is a concept in economics called economies of scale, which means the larger the volume of your production, the lower the cost per unit, the more efficient, the better quality products you can create. And our problem in the global south in general is that our economies tend to be small. So we're talking about a country of 30, 40, even 50 million consumers. It's not large enough of a market to industrialize because your internal demand is low. So then your only option is to export. Now good luck competing with made in Germany, made in Japan, when you're trying to industrialize today in 2023. But our opportunity as a large African market, we have massive demand, we have massive needs. So the economies of scale are available if we strategize as a block of 54 countries to use the complementarity of our resources and capabilities to manufacture and deploy for our internal market. And that's how you start hitting those economies of scale, reducing the cost per unit, improving efficiency. And it's creating the major building block that all of our economies need, because there's no country in the world that can function without food and without energy. And we tend to skip those, import them, and focus on other things while the foundation is still not there. So that's our opportunity.
For layman who's listening in, it sounds like an oxymoron, or at least it's a bit confusing, because we're told we have the resource, yet we are not able to enjoy the full potential or impact of the resource if it's converted. How do we change that? You've talked about the infrastructure of finance that's worked against us. How do we change that other factor where we can actually gain from our own resource?
It's also access to technology. So you can have all the resources you want, you can have all the labor skills you want, but if you don't have the capacity to actually manufacture, which is the part that's lacking. So this is why a Pan-African industrial strategy on renewable energy gives us at least the first bargaining chip that we can use. We say we're united, we have a coherent, holistic vision for how we're going to develop and become self-reliant, but we're lacking technological capabilities for manufacturing. Some of the climate finance aspect has to be not just cash, but transfer of technology and actual partnerships, as in partners, not as in colonial extractors, right? So when we have a united front on the African side, we can say, this is our bargaining chip. Who wants to partner with us as an equal partner? It could be Germany, it could be the US, it could be Japan, it could be China. Like Prime Minister Mia Mottley of Barbados always says, friends of all, satellites of none. But when you have one slice of a bargaining chip, it's useless. You have to have a full bargaining chip. And that's a Pan-African industrial vision that we want our leaders to rally around. And it's not because we want to dominate the world. It's because we want to reposition ourselves as equal sovereigns in the global economy.
Interesting aspect there. You can have the last question.
Yeah, and of course, the narrative is shifting when it comes to how Africa is positioning itself. We've always gone to this particular meetings, COP, with the sense that, oh, we are victims, oh, we are vulnerable. But then now there's a new narrative that is coming up where we're saying, actually, we're ready for investments. We're opening our markets for us to invest in green technology, in innovations, especially from the young people. And of course, here at the Africa Climate Summit, that is a very big component. And so we are expecting that the African heads of states are going to be doing a Nairobi Declaration. What are your expectations for the Nairobi Declaration?
Very good question. So this is an African summit. This is not COP. So while we're inviting the rest of the world, the non-African part of the world, to come witness our ambitions and witness our vision, we're not inviting them to veto our decisions, right? So we can be as bold, as ambitious as we want in this summit. And that's what I expect from our leaders. Not to take into account, well, this is not going to work in COP. This is not COP. This is Nairobi.
Yeah.
So we get to decide what is the best outcome. We have to have a long-term strategic vision for ourselves on climate, on development, on everything, and let's declare it. This is our place. And then when you don't have a long-term strategic vision for yourself, I guarantee you're already part of somebody else's strategic vision. Right? And this is, every country and every economic bloc has the right to envision itself and has the right to use its economic diplomacy, its incentives, to nudge everybody else in the position where they want to see them. But we also have the right to position ourselves in that global economy because we are rich. We were not colonized because we were poor. We were colonized because we were extremely rich, and we're still rich. But on the narrative of not playing the victim when it comes to this, I agree. Nobody should play the victim. But if we were the victim of climate change, if we were the victim of colonialism, we're not gonna pretend like we're not victims because somebody's saying don't play the victim. So yes, we are a victim, and we demand compensation, we demand reparations, not just financial resources, but transfer of technology and reparations of the financial architecture that put us in this position. The 1944 financial architecture, the trade architecture that was designed in the early years of independence without our full participation. We're the victims of that system, and that needs to change.
Last and really briefly, people critique such conversations of being high level, where we're just having the doctors, the presidents conversate and talk about this. Will it really have impact trickling down to the people on the ground?
I think it's the other way around. I think the impact should be trickling up from grassroots, from civil society, because this is the conversation happening in the Real People Summit on the other side of those buildings. These are the declarations that civil society organizations from across the continent are asking for. They're asking for climate reparations. They're asking for redesigning the global financial architecture. And they're demanding investments in food sovereignty, agroecology, Pan-African industrial policy. So what we're waiting for is this stuff to trickle up to our leaders in the background. And it has to be at that high level, because who's going to coordinate a Pan-African industrial policy? It's not the private sector. It's not the responsibility of civil society. It's the responsibility of our governments. So technical teams from ministries across the continent with a mandate from our heads of states and heads of government.
Dr. Fadhel Kaboub, thank you so much for your insights. And I think he's given us some leakage into the declaration with what he's spoken about Pan-African approach.
I didn't see the declaration.
No. I'm sure it's going to have a Pan-African tone to it and approach to it. And we really appreciate your perspective as the president of the Global Institute for Sustainable Prosperity. Asante sana for being with us.
Karibu sana. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Conversation continues.